The Dragon Ball Sparking series is finally back after 17 long years with its newest and most hyped up installment, Sparking Zero. Also known as the Budokai Tenkaichi series here in North America, Sparking is undoubtedly one of the most beloved and nostalgic series of video games based on Dragon Ball. So when it was announced that we'd be getting a new direct follow-up to those three games released on the PlayStation 2, everybody went nuts. To put into perspective how long it's been between Sparking Zero and its predecessor, Sparking Meteor, there have been 3 entire generations of consoles that have been released. That's a long time. And video games have come a long way since 2007, Dragon Ball games especially. We've gotten quite a few great DB games over the years, competitive 2D fighters, RPG games, and even other 3D arena fighters that tried to follow in the footsteps of Sparking, but they just didn't have that same magic. The idea of a 4th Sparking game was just an outlandish dream for many years, and as we kept getting new and different Dragon Ball games, it felt impossible, but after all this time and all this waiting, that dream finally became reality. Does Sparking Zero live up to the hype though? Is it just as fun as those games we played 17 years ago? Here are some of my first impressions on the game, and whether or not I think it's a worthy comeback for the Sparking series. Being the 4th game in the Sparking series, it's no surprise that gameplay feels similar to what we saw in the previous 3 Sparking games. If you've played any of those games in the past at all, you're already familiar with the basics of how Sparking Zero functions, even before it throws you into its opening tutorial. The way characters move, the way they attack, counter, and dodge, even down to the special attacks, the boost mechanic, beam clashes, and melee combos you can pull off, Sparking Zero's gameplay is almost exactly like what it was back in the day. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Instead, refine it and make it better. Sparking Zero did exactly that. It created a combat system that felt familiar enough to old Sparking players so they could pick it up and play without any issue, but there's a few welcome additions that make it feel like a proper step up and not a complete copy and paste from games that are nearly 2 decades old. Sparking Zero's gameplay is both simple and easy to get into, while at the same time very rewarding to those who take the time to master all the mechanics that aren't just spamming the punch button, key attacks, and special attacks. It's very satisfying to pull off things like Sonic Sway and all those unique counters that you'll see throughout your battles. In fact, I'd even argue that Sparking Zero makes it more of a necessity for the player to experiment and do more with their gameplay rather than just spamming to victory. As you progress through the game, there are certain CPU difficulty spikes that force you out of your comfort zone and make you use your power-up techniques more frequently just to keep up, and because it felt like the CPUs kept blocking all my attacks at a certain point, I had to get creative and use Solar Flare or Instant Transmission more often just to get around them. These were techniques that I never had to use in the older Sparking games, and of course, you aren't forced to use them this time around either, but I like how Sparking Zero's increased difficulty encourages you to do so. Overall, Sparking Zero's gameplay is just so much fun and so fleshed out when compared to the previous 3 games. It's a little bit more challenging, which is appropriate at times, but it feels more rewarding once you get a few battles under your belt and you know what you're doing. The combat system is inviting to new players, yet familiar enough to veterans who just want more of what we saw in those older games. Fighting in this game is just fun, and it captures the spirit of Dragon Ball, and that is what is most important. The biggest selling point for the older Sparking games was the large number of characters on its roster. Sparking Meteor had just about every major Dragon Ball character you could think of, so many that they were even tossing in bottom-of-the-barrel characters like Apool and Frieza Soldier, and we all ate it up because it was so much fun throwing someone like Mr. Satan up against Omega Shenron. There were endless amounts of matchups we could put together, some that were never even possible in the main series, and that's what made the massive roster so much fun. Sparking Zero is no different, except this time, we now have characters from Dragon Ball Super and Dragon Ball Daima that we can pull from, rather than just OG Dragon Ball, DBZ, and DBGT. This means that we can throw in even more characters into an already gigantic roster. At launch, Sparking Zero had an insane record of 182 playable characters from across the entire franchise, and that is excluding the inevitable DLC that we're going to get. That is an insane amount of people to choose from, and granted, a lot of them are transformations or duplicates of other fighters, but what makes Sparking Zero different is that each of these characters feel different. At their core, each character can punch, throw a projectile, fly, and fire off special or ultimate attacks, but they all feel different. It comes down to the way they're animated, the way they chain together combos, and all their unique transformation and special attack animations. It doesn't feel like the old Sparking games where half the characters fired off that same full power energy wave in the same exact way. There's a lot of love and polish that was put into these characters. The way they look, the way they interact with other characters during the fight and on the select screen. There's a lot more variety this time around, and I found myself constantly changing out my team and choosing more fighters rather than just sticking to the 5 that I liked the most. Unlocking characters this time around is a bit different though. You can unlock them as you progress through the story mode like usual, or you can unlock them through other modes like the World Tournament. But I feel like the main way that people will be getting these characters is by visiting the shop and buying them if you have enough Zenny. It feels a bit weird at first being able to unlock Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta an hour into your first playthrough, but hey, with so many characters to choose from, I don't blame the game for making it easier for us to get them and use them for battles much quicker. Compared to the previous games, there's not a lot of stages to choose from in Sparking Zero, but what we got, there's a lot of great options. We have returning fan favorites like the Hyperbolic Time Chamber, Planet Namek, and the World Tournament stage. Not only that though, we also have a few newer ones like the Tournament of Power Ring, and a Destroyed City that better fits the aesthetic of the Goku Black saga. Like in Sparking Meteor though, a lot of these stages let you change the time of day that you play in, and that's great. It gives those stages more variety behind them. A few of these stages have some great hazards and Easter eggs behind them too, like if you fire a blast in the World Tournament arena, the crowd gets scared and runs off, letting you fight freely around a much larger area rather than be restricted to just the stage. Speaking of, these stages are so much larger than what they were in the old Sparking games, making it much easier to lose sight of your opponent. And not only are these stages massive, but everything is so well detailed. The city stage was always one of my favorites in the older games and undoubtedly remains my favorite going into Sparking Zero simply because of how beautiful it looks. The characters actually feel like the appropriate size in comparison to the scenery around them, and that helps greatly with immersion. My biggest nitpick with the stage selection though is simply that there's not that many to pick from, and I have a feeling it's because we're going to get them as DLC. It's crazy to me how we have a fully modeled Kami's Lookout and Kame House available as part of the main menu, but they weren't made into stages. I don't mind them being DLC alongside some characters, but I just wish they were put into the base game since they're already modeled. But what good is a stage if there's not good music to listen to? My thoughts on Sparking Zero's soundtrack is kind of limited at the moment. I haven't had as much time to sit and ponder over these tracks like I have with songs from the older games, but I'm sure over time these songs will become classics. My overall opinion on what I've heard so far though, I like it, especially since they're including songs from the actual anime alongside those original pieces. There's enough variety that each track has its own feel for the kind of battle that you're wanting to put together, and that is what matters. You don't want each song to feel the same, or else each of your battles are going to feel repetitive. Overall, there's a fun selection of stages and a lot of great music to choose from, but unlike previous games, you have to choose the stages and music first before you choose your fighter, which is weird, but there's a reason for that. Continuing off what I was just talking about, the visuals in Sparking Zero are vastly different when compared to what we've seen in the past. It can be seen as both a good thing and a bad thing, and I've seen plenty of people be split on whether or not they like the visual direction of this game. The good things about the visuals are that this game looks beautiful with its fighting animations and cutscenes. Aside from a few that look a bit wonky, every character model looks like it was picked up straight from the anime and dropped into this game, which has been the biggest selling points for some of the most recent and popular Dragon Ball games like Fighters and Kakarot. We want our games to look like the anime, and this game does a pretty good job at capturing that aesthetic. In previous Sparking games, character models were blocky, and while there is a charm to each of those visual styles, we can all agree that they show their age, which isn't a bad thing, but games have evolved to look much better, and I think Sparking Zero did a great job in the looks department. However, a lot of what people don't like about the visual representation can be boiled down simply to the direction they took with the menus, primarily the character select screen. Like I said earlier, you choose the stage and music you want first before picking your character, and that's because when you select the characters, their models drop down onto the stage and you transition into the fight within seconds. The game already has you loaded onto the stage in real time when you pick your character, and that is really cool, and an incredible showcase of the power of these new-gen consoles. But while it is a cool gimmick, Sparking Zero had to sacrifice visual aesthetic to make it work. They could have easily replaced the character icons with actual renders that are present on the Sparking Zero website, or they could have condensed all the transformations and fusions into sub-menus around the base character. But they didn't. What we got instead was an entire screen of Gokus and Vegetas that we have to scroll through just to get to characters like Bojack or Janemba. It's not the end of the world, but there's just so many things they could have done differently to make the screen look cleaner. Aside from the messy character select screen, the modes you select from on the main menu are super interactive and fun. I love how all the characters are modeled and moving around as we follow Goku, jumping around from place to place. It makes me feel more immersed whenever I pick what mode I want to go into. Those different modes are the battle and training section, where you can either play online with friends or offline against a CPU or another player. You can do your typical battle, can train to better learn the game's mechanics, or participate in the World Tournament mode, where you can choose from a wide variety of tournaments seen in the actual series, with each of them having their own unique rules. Then there's the challenges and missions section, where if you've played Dokkan Battle or Legends, you're quite familiar with this mode already. Basically, as you play throughout the game and achieve different things, you unlock small rewards from either Lord Zeno or Whis. Next, there's the Shop and Customize section. In the Shop and Customize section, there are two different sub-menus that either take you to the shop, where you spend Zenny to unlock capsules, characters, character outfits, voices, music, strategy items, and player cards. If you go over to Customize, you can take everything you bought and equip them onto characters to make them stronger, make them look the way you want, and even emote a specific way that is entirely unique to your style. It's a really cool section. Then if you go down to your player card, that is basically your online profile, where it shows your online data and all your favorite aspects of the game, ranging from your favorite character to favorite modes and even titles. In a sense, this entire section is very similar to what we've already gotten in Dokkan and Legends. Next is the gallery, where you can visit the encyclopedia, view your own personal data, or watch fight replays. The encyclopedia is a really fun way to learn more about certain characters, and even hear little tidbits about them from Chi-Chi, Bulma, and Videl, just like how Chi-Chi used to comment on all the fighters back in Sparking Meteor. As the three of them talk over what looks like a Discord call, you'll discover so many different Easter eggs throughout their commentary. You could easily spend hours just learning and listening to them talk about, roast, and fawn over certain characters. Next is the Come Forth section, where after gathering Dragon Balls throughout the game, you can summon one of three dragons, Shenron, Purunga, or Super Shenron, and all of them can grant special wishes that unlock characters, outfits, or other things that can benefit your game. Then, last but not least, is the main mode of the game, Episode and Custom, which I'm going to dedicate an entire section just to talk about. The story mode can be broken down into two sections, the main story episodes and custom battle. Before we jump into the main story mode, let's talk about custom battles, which is something new that we've never seen before in any other Dragon Ball game. For the first time ever, Sparking Zero lets the player officially create their own episodic scenarios and battles. In the past, all we've had was our own imagination whenever we wanted to come up with a wacky what-if fight or situation, but now, Custom Battle actually lets us create our own title cards, episode titles, and custom dialogue that can be attached to any battle to make it feel like an actual episode from the anime and feel like these characters are actually interacting. I haven't spent too much time in this mode because there's so many possibilities of creating your own what-if situation. You could honestly get sucked into this mode for hours upon hours, but I've seen plenty of other people make up scenarios, and it's pretty crazy how detailed you can get. I've literally seen someone recreate Smugstick's what if Goku was betrayed and trapped in the time chamber. It's crazy. One of the first scenarios that I did, though, was essentially what if Perfect Cell was in the Tournament of Power, and I was able to play through it, have Cell beat Jiren, and actually be congratulated by Zeno and the Grand Priest, winning the prize of the Super Dragon Balls. It was a simple scenario, but for my first exposure to this mode, it definitely makes me want to go back and make other situations, as it feels like the sky is the limit. Now, let's talk about the main story mode though, which is what I've spent the most time on throughout my playthrough. This isn't your typical Dragon Ball adventure, as you don't play the entire story from Raditz up until the Tournament of Power in one swoop. Instead, Sparking Zero's story mode functions very similarly to Budokai 3, where you only have a handful of characters to pick from. You pick one of the characters like Goku or Frieza, and you can only play the most important battles that are relevant to their story. Frieza's story, for example, begins on planet Namek where he's fighting Goku, then we go on to fight future Trunks back on Earth, and after that, his story takes a huge break until he's resurrected far in the future as Golden Frieza. As a big fan of Budokai 3, I love this direction they took with the story mode because it keeps things fresh, while at the same time allowing you to play different parts of the story out of order, which may not be ideal for new Dragon Ball fans, but for people like us who have played the same story over and over and over again, it's a fun diversion from the usual formula and lets me jump around whenever I want. Besides, the characters they selected for the story mode covered just about every arc and major fight throughout the series, so it's not like we're missing big chunks of the story. What makes Sparking Zero's story mode even more interesting though, is that you have the opportunity to take different branching paths during certain situations. What if Goku decided to not team up with Piccolo to take on Raditz, and instead went at it alone? What would happen and how would the story play out? Sparking Zero actually lets you choose what you want to do and create several different branching off points that let you take the story in an entirely different direction. What if scenarios are a big aspect behind this game's story mode. From what I've played so far, I have already encountered so many different scenarios that have led my playthrough in so many different directions, and I can't even imagine how many more I'll find as I progress further along in the game. I spent several hours on Goku Saiyan Saga's story alone, discovering all the paths that you can take, ranging from him fighting Raditz alone like I just mentioned, to him actually surviving the fight, which then branches off into different scenarios where he dies anyways, or survives and trains with the other Z Fighters in preparation for Nappa and Vegeta, leading to him being weaker as a result, and the consequences of that, and so on and so forth. Because of these different branching off storylines, Sparking Zero's story mode has a lot of replay value because you'd want to go back and see what happens, and what your actions led to. The length of these scenarios are always different. It could either be a one and done decision that ends the story right there, or it takes you down a long path that leads to an entirely new and unique story. Keep in mind though, the game does not warn you when you get to a branching scenario. You usually have to keep an eye out on the story map and figure out what to do by yourself. I learned that the hard way, having to replay a few fights over and over again. On top of that, you can't go down these different what-if paths if you lower the difficulty. You have to beat the main fight on the standard difficulty. Every character has something called a sparking episode that highlights some of their major what-if scenarios. I won't spoil too many of these for you guys who want to discover them for yourselves, but one of my favorites is one that was actually highlighted in some of the marketing material before the game was released. It's about Goku surviving the battle against Raditz, being there to keep his friends alive during the battle against Nappa, and going Super Saiyan against Grade 8 Vegeta after they all die anyway. That story takes you down a much different path than what we saw in the main storyline, but it's so interesting and was definitely worth that diversion that I had to take away from the main game. The best way that I can describe these sparking episodes is that they're a love letter to the hardcore Dragon Ball fans. These branching what-if scenarios are made specifically for those people that love watching what-if videos from people like Karthu, Salad Saiyan, or even myself whenever I make one. They're designed for hardcore fans who want that diversion from the typical Dragon Ball story that we've seen time and time again. After this video, I cannot wait to jump back into the story mode to see just how many branching off platforms there are and how each character's story changes based on the decisions that I make. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, just based off the 10-ish hours that I put into it so far, has potential to be the Dragon Ball game. There's so much stuff here, it doesn't matter if you're a newcomer to the series or a hardcore lifelong fan like myself, there's something to love about Sparking Zero on all fronts. The gameplay is insanely fun and easy to learn, but at the same time, difficult to master and perfect. There are so many fan-favorite characters to choose from, fun stages to immerse yourself on, and loads of Easter eggs that you can discover just by hearing characters talk to each other and interact with each other with each battle. There's a lot of opportunity to play out your craziest what-if scenarios through the custom battle mode, and by discovering what the story mode has to offer through those branching off directions that lead you into these crazy and wacky situations. The entire game is just amazing and is a huge love letter to Dragon Ball and what this series represents. In my eyes, it's not only a worthy successor to the Sparking series, but an amazing culmination of everything that we've seen from just about every other Dragon Ball game in the past. Sparking Zero has taken feedback from certain games, gathered it all together, and delivered it to us in one amazing package. Like I said, I've only spent about 10 hours on this game so far trying to get a feel for everything, but I still have a lot more to discover and a lot more to learn. I could easily cover this game in a much more detailed review later on down the line, but I could not wait to get my first impressions out to you guys to share my love and admiration for this game and the Dragon Ball series as a whole. I just hope that if you pick it up for yourselves, you're all experiencing the same amount of joy and awe that I've had with it so far. If you're still wondering if you should get it or not, I give it a golden seal of approval and highly recommend it. As always, thank you all so much for watching today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. And if you've already had the chance to play Sparking Zero, what are your thoughts on the game? Leave your comments down below and let's have a discussion, and be sure to share your friend codes down in the comments below in case you guys want to fight against each other online, whether with me or with somebody else watching the video. If you're a fan of all things Dragon Ball, please do me a favor and give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. I talk about anything and everything relating to Dragon Ball, so you won't be disappointed with all the other videos I already have here. Until my next video though, thank you all for watching. I will be seeing all of you Dragon Ball fans later. See ya!